Okay, if I could have everyone's attention, take a seat so we can get started this evening. Thank you. Good evening and welcome. And I want to thank everyone for taking the time tonight out of your busy schedule to view Erickson's living vision for Limestone Valley. I am Roger Kaplan. My wife Patty and I were the first residents of River Hill when we moved into our home February 1992. Our daughter is a River Hill High graduate. I moved to Howard County over 40 years ago after I graduated from college to take a teaching position at Oakland Mills Middle School. I know most of you are saying in the audience, wow, that guy 40 years ago, he looks awfully young. But hey, I've been here for 40 years. I've owned the Kaplan Group for 28 years. It's an advertising, PR, and community outreach organization located in the Dorsey Hall area of Howard County. And I want to tell you, I have been engaged professionally by Erickson Living to do community engagement for Limestone Valley. I can tell you, Erickson Living has made it a point to me that they want to meet with as many people as they can in the community to hear what their input on what you're going to see tonight. We've met with dozens of individuals, various HOAs, River Hill Village Board members, so we have done an extensive amount of outreach to date, and it continues after tonight. And all the meetings have been very productive, and what you are going to see this evening is still our pre-submission plan. This is still evolving. What we've done with the plan is, as a result, some of already changes from we had a meeting here on June 15th, a community meeting. We had several hundred people, and since then we've met with a number of people. So again, the process is ongoing. We're anxious to hear your comments, your questions, and your feedback tonight. Tonight is a dialogue. It isn't, the first 45 minutes will be a presentation, and then afterwards there'll be about 45 minutes, if you will, for questions and answers. And then afterwards, we'd like to break up into groups. The plans are around the room. Architects, engineers will be by the plans to answer some more questions. We also, in the packet that you have note cards. And some folks we know do not like to get up, ask questions in a crowd. Feel free to drop it off on the table as you leave, and we will respond in a timely manner. Also, I urge you, everything what will be presented tonight will be on our website, Erickson@atlimestone.com. So when you ever want information, updates of meetings, etc., that will be on our website. That's Erickson@atlimestone.com. So our team who's sitting up here tonight, me, Roger Kaplan, from Erickson Living is Steve Montgomery, Vice President, and Scott Sawicki, who is back there in Community Development. Our architect is Mark Hickman, the young man. Carl Wilson is our traffic engineer. He's with the traffic group. And our landscape architect, Hank Ollinger and Brandon Rowe, are here this evening. And our land use attorney is Bill Erskine from Offit Kerman. Our agenda for tonight, an overview, what we've done with community engagement to date, updated proposal, which I just saw last night, CEF enhancements, CEF zoning regulations, conformance to existing plans and policy, our next steps, and then I said at the end, about 45 minutes or so for questions and comments. We'll go around with the mics and hand you a mic when you just raise your hand, but we'll go over the details of that afterwards. Now I'd like to introduce Steve Montgomery.
Okay, thank you, Roger. Appreciate that. And thanks again, everybody, coming out tonight. Weather is not as great. It's better than last night, but I know it's quickly changing on us. I'm going to go through a couple of slides here very quickly and get to the heart of this, which is all these smarter people at the other end of the table for me. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking again about Erickson. Many of you are probably familiar with us. And a brief explanation of what a CCRC is. as we've had some questions over the last several months. In some cases, maybe some confusion with active adult, which is a very popular type of housing offered by a lot of market rate builders today. So we'll try to get through that. And again, as Roger mentioned at the end of this, want to hear questions and try to answer anything else that might come up. Very briefly, and we had shared this back at our last 2 public meetings, study that was commissioned by Howard County back in 2015 to study for what was going to be the anticipated growth of seniors in Howard County. And I won't go through all these details and statistics, but it's very clear that in the next, since the study was done in a 20-year window, the increase of the silver tsunami that's coming in folks 75 and older and 85 and older is going to be significant. With that type of growth, the average number of residents that could be added every year is over 1,100 folks. What we're talking about tonight in our proposal, if successful, would be a mere drop in the bucket in terms of meeting some of that demand. There's clearly a crisis coming in some regard, and we feel that we've got an option that hopefully could address a big portion of that. There are copies of this report available on the side of the room if anybody has any specifics or would like to understand more about what that study did delve into. Very briefly, many of you may be familiar with Erickson. We have been very active in the Baltimore, Washington market for the last 30 plus years. We develop, own, and operate 20 communities around the country, serving over 24,000 residents. We have over 30 years of experience in this business and have been considered an industry leader, not only in terms of our health care, but in terms of, I think, providing and offering a very cutting-edge type of product and service to the market. Some of the examples of what we do, and we think we do very well, our focus is on integrated health and wellness for our residents, excuse me. The focus is on an integrated person-centered approach to aging and those healthcare services. We offer a proprietary healthcare plan, Erickson Advantage, that has received numerous ratings from the government on its approach to care. And in addition to that, we provide, with our healthcare, we have the largest geriatric healthcare provider or service in the country, with over 100 healthcare providers, including about 60 physicians who focus solely on geriatric care. And then, as I mentioned earlier, just some clarification of what a CCRC is. These are communities that are, as I said earlier, very different from the active adult 55 and better that is marketed quite extensively in this area. These are communities that are providing for the full continuum of care, from independent living, assisted living, skilled nursing, memory care, home support, and home health services, everything available on site. With that and a medical practice that what I've described, we have the full function for anybody in this age group could possibly need. Average age of these folks is 80 plus years. These are folks that have been out of the workforce for at least 15, 20 years. They are not looking for an encore career, but they're at the point in their life where they're starting to recognize the need for a housing option and service that provides healthcare services, and hopefully as well gives them some increased social interaction and healthcare opportunities with their peers. Our typical communities, and we'll hear a little bit of this tonight from some of our folks, we provide the full range of services within the community, healthcare, restaurants, and fitness and wellness centers, everything in a campus-style setting that eliminates the need. The example we love to cite is it's February, and there's 3 inches of snow on the ground, and there's a doctor's appointment that day. Somebody's able to go make that doctor's appointment because it's a 20-minute walk or a 10-minute walk to see their physician rather than trying to figure out how to get in the car, reschedule the appointment to get across town. We provide everything within our communities. As I mentioned as well, with our presence in the Baltimore-Washington market. These are two of the three communities in the Baltimore I-95 corridor, Charlestown and Riderwood, which is in the suburban Washington area. Charlestown, excuse me, was opened in 1983 and really became the standard for what we've been doing for the last 30 plus years. It is a very vibrant community, and as the numbers indicate up here, fully occupied with a very significant waiting list. Riderwood opened about 1999, and I think we've finally finished that out in the mid-2000s. And as well, much larger community, but again, significant statistics in terms of occupancy and waiting lists. At both of these communities, we also have approximately 200 plus residents who were former Howard County residents. This is part of our argument, along with some of the earlier data I shared with you, that substantiates the need for this type of service and housing product within Howard County. Excuse me. Very briefly, as Roger had touched on, since we did our initial meeting back in mid-June, we've had a number of meetings, both the kitchen table meetings, as we like to call them, as well as more formal meetings with some various HOAs in the community. We've done a couple of meetings with River Hill. We also did a balloon test back in early September. We're going to do a follow-up on that in early December. All of this is brought up as it describes it here. We want to make sure we're staying engaged with you all, collecting feedback. If there's concerns and questions, we want to hear about that. We don't want this to be in a tunnel. We want to solicit your feedback. Our goal here is, if we're successful with this proposal, that we will be your neighbor. We're not going to be the developer that builds this, flips it to a REIT out of New York and goes on, and you never hear of Erickson again. Once we're here, we are here. We will be your neighbor. We will be your integral part of the community, and want to make sure that our proposal we put forward works with everybody's needs and concerns. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Hank Allinger with Bowler to talk more of the specifics of the site.
I'm sorry, I forgot one housekeeping. There's a clipboard going around for sign-in tonight. If you want to, it's being passed around now. If you want to give us your name, email. If you don't want us for the minutes for this evening or any upcoming events, we will email you the minutes for this evening. If you want it to come, snail mail, we can certainly put a stamp on it and send it to your house. So that clipboard is somewhere right over there. So if you haven't signed it before you leave, let us know. Thank you. Sorry.
Roger, one other housekeeping matter. We have two handouts that were prepared by the Howard County Department of Planning and Zoning, and basically they explain the process and the procedure for rezoning real property within the county. And so I will have it available on the left hand, well, my left, your right hand side of the stage here. Feel free to come up. If you have to leave early, you can come up and get a copy of each one of those publications.
Yes, ma'am.
Quick.
No and no. Yeah, thank you, Jenny. The question was, if you sign the sheet that's going around, does that mean you support the project? No, that just means that you were in attendance this evening and that you are afforded the right to receive the minutes to this evening's meeting. Also, as Scott Sawicki from Erickson just stated, and very sorry for any misunderstanding, on our website we have a Contact Us tab and a Support Us tab. And you were saying that it was confusing on the Contact Us. Thank you, and Scott will make that change.
Thank you, Roger. I'm Hank Allinger again with Bowler Engineering. I am a planner and landscape architect and also a long-term Howard County resident. And we're going to talk about the site, and I'd like to just start out with an overview of the site conditions and the context, and then we're going to talk about the development plan. So the slide that we have up now shows an aerial photograph, and you can see the property that's highlighted here, which is the Limestone Valley Farm. It's about 60 acres. And if you're on Route 108, you'll know that you're passing the frontage. The one corner is anchored by the Free State gas station, which is right here. And then when you get to the Shepherd Lane, that's the limit of the frontage on Route 108. So that pretty much defines the property. Again, the neighborhood, obviously, we're adjacent to the village of River Hill. Key adjacent uses, obviously, are the village center, the Lynn Lithcomb Church. We've got the garden center across the street, and we've got River Hill High School, Clarksville Elementary. Also, our adjacent neighbors, key adjacent neighbors, are here in Clearview, Walnut Grove, which is way beyond, back on Shepherd Lane. It's about a mile and a half back. And then it's important to know that everything behind us, again, is all farmland and is all in the ag preservation program. So again, 60 acres here, but defined completely by ag pres behind us, commercial uses, and then various community uses here in River Hill. If we go to the next slide, we've got just an overview about the zoning, the existing zoning, and we're going to come back to talk about our zoning proposal later in the presentation, but this just gives you the overview again. Everything in the gray is Newtown. So this is all literally the village of River Hill. We've got residential zoning in the lighter yellow golden tones, and then of course this is all in the rural conservation in here in this zone. And again, this is all ag preservation. Just for context, red of course is all the commercial uses right on Route 108. So again, just to give you an overview of the zoning. When we look at the site itself, again, it's a little hard to read the topography here, but the site falls. The main features are, this is the open land, the fields that you'd see as you drive by. This is all, the darkest green is, of course, all wooded. And then these areas represent buffers that will be required by the county to protect the stream valley and woodlands, which we have in this area, in the central part of the site. And then also we have another stream corridor that's on the edge of the property, and we're going to have associated buffers and tree preservation areas there. In terms of the topography, it's important to note when you're here on Route 108 that in fact the site falls considerably, and it's actually at this point back at the north end is actually about 70 feet lower than the elevation here, and you'll see how that relates to our overall planning of the site. Again, this is the Free State gas station right here in the corner. These are the commercial uses. This is River Hill Garden Center here, the cemetery, and Clearview off the image there. Next up is Mark Heckman, who is our architect, who's going to talk about the development plan.
The sign-up sheet does go to the county, and we're following that as pre-submission community meeting rules by the county. You don't have to sign the sheet, but it will be going to the county, correct?
Sorry. It's okay. Good evening. My name is Mark Heckman. I'm an architect and planner with Marks Thomas Architects here in Baltimore, Maryland. I have been asked to share with you our current plans for the site. And just to orient everyone again, this is Clarksville Pike. This is Shepherd Lane right here. And I think the first thing you'll notice is it's kind of oddly shaped. There's buildings got kind of weird angles and things like that. And the reason for that is we are responding to exactly what Hank just described. So here are the woods, here's the stream buffer, and you'll notice that we placed buildings, groups of buildings on either side of the natural features of the site. And we refer to this collection of buildings as a neighborhood. So this would be, This would be neighborhood 1, and then on the other side of the stream buffer would be neighborhood 2. Up in this corner at the intersection of Shepherd and Clarksville Pike, we are proposing to put the care center, which is the building that contains the assisted living, memory care, and skilled nursing units that Steve referred to earlier. We do, and it's probably kind of hard to see from back there, but we do connect all the buildings with links and bridges, so that if mom is living in this building and needs to get to a doctor appointment in this building, she can go without going outside across the bridge here, through this building, through a link here, and get to her doctor appointment. So on those days where the weather's really bad, they can, transverse, go from one side of the campus to the other. The buildings will range from 1 story to 5 stories. We are proposing that the buildings along Clarksville Pike be the lower story buildings. The two, actually this is a 1-story building. These are 2- and 3-story buildings here. This is a 4-story building here. And I think Hank mentioned that the site dramatically slopes from Clarksville Pike to the back. And that's where we're going to place the 5-story buildings so that the taller buildings will be receding away from the road. We are proposing a primary entrance on Clarksville Pike right across from the River Hill Garden Center, or, well, the old entrance of the River Hill Garden Center. And that primary entrance is, for the most part, for residents and their visitors. We are proposing adding an public access road here, and I think Carl's going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But we'll have a secondary entrance off of that, and that's for employees and all the service deliveries. So we want to get that kind of traffic off of Clarksville Pike. Resident parking will be under the buildings. And also most of the employee parking actually will be under the buildings. So every resident will have, be able to go under their buildings, take, once they park their cars, take an elevator up to their unit and never have to go outside. Besides that advantage, it also allows us to free up the site for more green areas. So we don't have large parking lots for asphalt paving everywhere. So that allows us to have more green space. All told, we are proposing approximately 1,200 independent living units, and I said that that's in these 2 neighborhoods here. And about 200 to 240 care center units. That would be the assisted living, memory care, and skilled nursing. One other thing I've been asked to mention is that we will be tearing down the existing Free State gas station. And that's in order to get this road in, this new access road. And we'll be replacing it with a new service station, presumably something that looks a lot nicer and glows a lot less. Some of you may be wondering, are we going to build all of this all at one time, and is this going to be a massive construction site? And the answer to that is no. Erickson will typically build just as the market demands. So the first thing we'll do is construct a sales center right near the proposed entrance to the community. And along with that, about 50 parking spaces. So that's where the sales activity will be initially. Next, we will do all the traffic improvements and the streetscape improvements. And we will do that before any resident moves into any of the residential buildings. So phase 3 would be the first few apartment buildings, residential buildings, and some of the amenity space, the dining rooms and some of the other amenity spaces that Steve mentioned. And then from there, we will only construct a building at a time incrementally as the market demands. So as we get reservations for another 50, residences, we'll build the next building. Typically in a community of this size, it will take anywhere from 6 to 10 years to build out. And again, that just depends on the market. It could be quicker. It could be a little bit longer, but I would say that's the average. One thing I want to mention is I realize that plan is probably very difficult to see from where you're all sitting. So I brought along 4 boards, and they're at the corners of the room. And I think I'll be standing maybe at this corner. So if you all have any specific questions about the plans, I'll be happy to answer any of those questions at that time. Lastly, I want to mention that although we haven't finalized any building designs at this point, we do intend to be respectful of the local building traditions here. And these are a few, but I have dozens of pictures of residential buildings in Howard County, some very old buildings, historical buildings, some new buildings. For instance, the villas of River Hill, you might recognize most of these. But our goal is to extract from these buildings certain architectural features, materials, fenestration patterns, maybe even some massing, so that what we design for the Limestone Valley community will look like it belongs here in this community and not some just cookie cutter design that we just kind of dropped in. So that's our goal. And more importantly, I think we're trying to achieve, and this is a very early sketch from Clarksville Pike, what we're trying to achieve is this kind of residential village feel that feels like it belongs here, and more importantly, feels like it's home to seniors. So with that, I will pass it back to Hank, and thank you, everyone.
The next portion of the presentation is going to be focused on community enhancements. You're going to hear Carl Wilson's going to talk in detail about the transportation enhancements, because we heard there's some traffic problems out there on the road somewhere, which I know you're familiar with. But in conjunction with that, not only are there transportation enhancements we're proposing, but we're looking at some significant pedestrian improvements and some park enhancements so that we can start to define in conjunction with those transportation enhancements. There was a plan that was developed by the county and adopted last year, and it was called the Clarksville Pike Streetscape Plan. And it identified a number of different improvements for Route 108, for Clarksville Pike, to make the road more pedestrian friendly, to make it more bike friendly, to make it more attractive, to encourage the right kind of development along the roadway. And so we had that as really a guideline in working on the plan. And so you'll see that we've adopted, if you may or may not have looked at that plan, but we've adopted those elements in designing the frontage of our site on Route 108 and also our public access road. So some of the things that we're highlighting here, we're basically creating a linear park along the frontage. And what that means is that we're required by the county to have an 8 to 10 foot wide what's called a multi-use path. It's wide enough that you can ride a bike on it, you can walk on it, you can take strollers on it. And that's going to be basically in the right-of-way zone, probably about 5 to 8 feet off the roadway. There'll be a green space, a tree lawn, and then there's going to be a nice wide sidewalk. So in conjunction with that, we've created a setback zone And we've created a secondary loop walk that runs along back here in front of our buildings. And the idea is that, you know, we start to capture a park space, a kind of a linear park space. And so with that, there's actually seating areas back here. There's going to be extensive landscape. And so, you know, the idea is that, you know, you're starting to get off the road some dimension, and there's, you know, another pathway and seating areas. And in fact, since the grade is going down, you're going to be slightly lower than the roadway. And so the idea is to make this feel park-like. So in conjunction with that improvement, of course, we're going to be looking at crosswalks at Shepherd for a proposed access road. We're actually even looking at some opportunities to potentially extend these pedestrian connections into the neighborhood, east and west, and potentially south to tie. This is at the intersection of Linden, Lithicum. Again, the idea is that we're trying to integrate this community with River Hill with the adjacent neighborhoods, and one of the key ways we can do that is with these pedestrian linkages. So you can see there's a sidewalk connection that runs up the public access road, and we've identified some other opportunities for park space on our public access road, and two ideas that we're putting forward. One is a dog park, which we're showing in this location, and that would be fenced, and it would be basically have public access from the roadside and also have access from our community. So the idea is that you know, there'd be a couple of different gates coming into that from different directions and pathways leading to it. But again, the idea is that we're going to do these sidewalk linkages and then a dog park. And again, folks from Linden, Lithicum, folks from, there's actually Dogtopia, like right up the road here, if you've ever been there. I suspect they'll have some customers for the dog park, which will be right here. The other amenity that we're proposing is a playground. And again, we've heard through some of the discussions with community members the notion that perhaps a playground in this area could be used. And so you can see that is shown up on the plan as well. So that's sort of a summary of some of the public amenities that we're proposing at the property perimeter. Again, with the idea of trying to integrate this community in the River Hill neighborhood. Next up, Carl is going to talk in detail about the transportation improvements that are being proposed.
Thanks, Hank. Again, my name is Carl Wilson. I'm a senior project manager with the Traffic Group, and we've been working on the traffic studies for this project. First thing I'm going to talk about tonight is actually what we're not proposing to do, and that's what you see up here in blue. These are improvements that you'd see if this was a typical development with a similar amount of trips coming in. You can see we have a right turn lane along 108, a right acceleration lane coming out of the site, a separate left turn lane, as well as a secondary entrance along Shepherd Lane, and also a right turn lane along Shepherd Lane. Value of these improvements is about $750,000. And again, this is the improvements that you would see if this was another development coming in outside of the CEF process that this project's going through. These improvements don't really solve any of the operations issues that are present out on Clarksville Pike today, and quite frankly, they're very self-serving. It's basically the bare minimum that a developer could get away with if it was outside of the CEF process. Underneath, what you see in yellow is what we are proposing to do. And the purpose of this slide is really just to show the extent of all the improvements that extend from Linden Linthicum Lane for approximately 1,200 feet to beyond Shepherd Lane. Importantly, you'll see the continuation of the 5-lane section that's available today on the west side of Linden Linthicum. It continues along our site frontage to beyond Shepherd Lane. We're going to get into more depth on the next slides as you see some more of our proposal. But you can see the value of these improvements is between $4 and $5 million right now is our initial cost estimate. This slide shows what we're proposing to do at Shepherd Lane and its intersection with Clarksville Pike. First, you see there's a realignment of Shepherd Lane. The existing roadbed is right here. It intersects at a pretty steep angle at 108. We're proposing to realign the road to come in at closer to a 90-degree angle. This alignment's been reviewed and the concept's been approved by both State Highway and Howard County's Department of Public Works for the location of the alignment. The other thing you see here is we're proposing to add another lane along Shepherd Lane right here, approaching 108. Under existing conditions, if you have one car that's waiting to turn left from Shepherd Lane onto 108, they get stuck behind, if somebody's turning right, they get stuck behind that left turning vehicle. So under this scenario, you're going to have a separate lane to turn right onto 108, and that can occur as a right turn on red, but also as part of the signal phasing that we're proposing here. We'll be able to have a left turn going at the same time as the right turn. So it's going to make operations a whole lot more efficient at the intersection here to alleviate some of the existing blocking conditions that we have there. You can see there's an additional through lane here as well that begins to form on the east side of 108 in that westbound direction. So that 5-lane section actually starts over here and continues all the way through our site frontage. We're going to talk in a second about, in the next slide, about the left turn lane extension, but before we get to that, in terms of levels of service, you can see here under background conditions, background accounts for regional growth and the implementation of other approved developments in the area. This intersection would be at level of service F during both the morning and afternoon peak periods. We're going to get it improved to B during the morning and C in the afternoon. Now, understand levels of service go from A, which is optimal, which is no congestion whatsoever, a free flow condition, all the way down to F, which is failing. That's the worst level of service. In this case, B and C are very, very good levels of service. In Howard County, we could actually get all the way down to an E and still be acceptable at a state intersection. The next improvement here, we're just shifting a little bit to the west, so you still see the intersection of 108 and Shepherd here. What we're proposing here is to extend the existing left turn lane from its existing length of about 150 feet. What happens there today, and I'm sure everybody deals with this on a daily basis, you can store about 6 vehicles in that left turn lane. Once that 7th car lines up, it's going to actually block the through lane and cause congestion because people can't continue through the intersection. So our proposal is actually to extend that left turn lane from that existing storage of 6 vehicles all the way down to Linden Linthicum. So it's an extension of approximately 1,200 feet. It's going to satisfy our demand, the anticipated demand at that intersection of about 15 vehicles, plus provide very adequate deceleration length and maneuvering length at the intersection. This slide also shows the site access improvements that we're proposing, and these are very similar to what we showed on that first slide, where we do have a right turn lane into the site, a separate left turn lane. This is actually very important because this lane doesn't interfere with that lane I just described. This is a whole separate lane that we're proposing to get into the site to avoid the left turn queue that you see on 108. There's also channelization proposed here, and what that's going to do is that's going to restrict left turns from leaving the site. So if you're leaving the community entrance here, you're going to have to turn right onto 108, and we'll show you in the next slide how those left turns are going to get out. But for this slide, again, we're proposing to restrict that left turn movement. Moving further west, this is the intersection of 108 and Linden Linthicum. So that the church is over here. You can see, first of all, we do have the reconstructed service station here in the corner. The most important thing you see here is a traffic signal. A traffic signal is something that's been part of the plans for this area for a very long time. An independent traffic study in 2015 recommended the implementation of the traffic signal as part of the multimodal study for the corridor. It's also shown in the Clarksville Streetscape Plan as a recommended improvement. So we're proposing to incorporate that traffic signal here at Linden Linthicum. That's going to reduce minor street delay. It's going to allow for safer movement of traffic from Linden Linthicum onto 108, and it might actually even bring people today that are using intersections to the west, might be able to allow them to come out at the signal here to access 108 instead. You also see here that there are the crosswalks that Hank mentioned. Those crosswalks are going to have signalized movements at them for the pedestrians, so it's going to make it safer for pedestrians to cross and to access the park features and what we're proposing as part of our site. The other thing that this signal is going to do is it's going to permit the potential synchronization of signals from 32 all the way up toward Shepherd Lane, because this is an ideal spacing for the signals to come into play here. We are proposing, again, the extension of the 5-lane section, so you can see we're proposing to extend this existing lane would continue all the way through our site access, so that 5-lane section continues, as well as here. This is an existing right turn drop, or right turn only onto Linden Linthicum Lane. We're proposing to continue that through to enhance the level of service. So you can see under that background condition, we're at A during the morning, we drop all the way down to E in the afternoon. And then with our proposed improvements, it would improve or would remain A, optimal in the morning, and improve to B in the afternoon. And again, that's a function of the additional capacity that's provided through the lanes here. You see at the top side here, we do see the proposed public access road coming in. We're going to show that in a little bit more detail on the next slide. This proposed public access road is going to extend from 108 all the way through our site and provide site access. As I mentioned before, this is going to help our left turns get out at a signalized intersection, which is going to be the safest, most efficient way for those left turns to leave the site. It's not only self-serving, though, because this is, first of all, it's going to be built to county standards for roads, but it's also going to allow for potential access to existing businesses located to the west. So any of those businesses today, if you're there, you have to make an unsignalized left turn onto 108, which can be challenging during the afternoon. What this is going to do is this is going to permit that potential connection to allow the customers to come out and utilize the proposed public access road to turn left onto 108 in a much safer and more efficient way. And finally, this is just a recap slide to show the extent of our improvements. Again, they're extending from the west of Linden Linthicum Lane all the way to the east of Shepherd Lane. It's a very extensive list of improvements that we're providing, and it's far more than you would get if it was just a regular development coming in outside of that CEF process. When we're done with our presentation and questions, there's boards in the back, so you can take a closer look at some of these improvements, and I'll be back there at the end to answer any questions that you might have. I'm going to turn it over to Bill Erskine.
Thank you, Carl. Good evening. My name is Bill Erskine, and I'm a land use attorney with a local law firm named Offutt Kerman. I also happen to be a long-time resident in the Clarksville area. I moved to Clarksville back in 1974 with my family when I was in the 3rd grade. And as you can imagine, I've seen an awful lot of change over that 4-decade time period. So this part of the presentation, although I'm last, I hope it's not least, the purpose of my presentation is to talk to you a little bit about the land use approvals that would be required for this proposed continuing care retirement community to be realized. And the first is that there's actually 2 processes that are going to run somewhat parallel with one another. And the first process is that the subject property, the 60 acres plus or minus, it needs to be incorporated into the planned service area for both water and sewer. And what that means is that most of Columbia, the River Hill Village Center, we get water and sewer bills, and we pay for that, and the water is piped to us through public service utility pipelines. And similarly, the sewage is handled that way. When you flush your toilet or take a shower, the water flows down to the Savage treatment plant and is treated at that location. Areas that are outside of the planned service area have their own private on-site water sources and septic treatment processes, and those are wells and septic systems, and so they dispose of their wastewater on site. So currently the property is outside of the planned service area, although it directly adjoins it, and what that means is that on at least 2 sides of the property, all along the Route 108 frontage, and then the commercial area of Clarksville, those sides are currently in the planned service area. So there's literally water and sewage directly adjoining the property. It just simply needs to be extended to incorporate the 60 acres that is the subject property. And the reason that this has to be done is number one, it's a very efficient and environmentally friendly way to treat sewage. Wastewater treatment, the technologies at the treatment plants are so much higher that almost by a factor of 10, they can treat sewage and reduce nitrogen levels and phosphates and things like that. So it's much more bay friendly, if you will. The other reason for making the proposal is that it is actually a requirement for the CEF zoning that you've heard spoken about tonight. In order for the CEF zoning to be approved, you must be served or within the planned service area for public water and sewer. Now, it's not necessary that you be within what we call the PSA, the planned service area, at the time that you submit your application, but it is a requirement that before the zoning board can give a final decision of approval, you have to have been incorporated. And so that's why I'm saying there's two sort of parallel processes. The one that must conclude first is the legislative process, which is the incorporation into the planned service area, and then simultaneously, but following somewhat later, will be the zoning board process. And so I want to just speak to you a little bit about what the CEF is, and I'm sorry for using acronyms and things like that. I realize that was used, and I don't think we ever really introduced what it is, but CEF zoning is a type of zoning. It stands for Community Enhanced Floating Zone. And it was a zone that was created, I'm going to say 2011 timeframe. It was just before the last comprehensive zoning that we had. So there was a bill that was passed to create this type of zoning category. And what's unique about it, it was Howard County's first example of what's often referred to as PUD zoning in other jurisdictions. And what that means is that there's not really any predefined bulk regulations for the property. They give certain criteria and certain uses that you can choose from, and then a petitioner would make application for it. And it has to be approved only by the zoning board. And the significance of that is that CEF zoning, Community Enhanced Floating Zone, can never be approved by the county council. And I say this because sometimes people will say, well, can't we just wait till the next comprehensive zoning and have this addressed at the next comprehensive zoning? And the answer is no, because CEF zoning has to be approved by the zoning board and only by the zoning board. So there's never been a CEF zone approved at comprehensive zoning, because that's a legislative process. So again, the purpose of this, as I said, it's PUD style zoning. And as the name suggests, it's supposed to have a public or a community benefit. And by that, what I mean is that you have to convey an enhancement, something that benefits the community, and not just the residents of your community. So there has to be something public. And as you can see, a very large part of this proposal is from an enhancement point of view, is trying to solve Clarksville's admittedly terrible traffic situation. It currently functions at a level of service F. If it fails, Shepherd Lane and 108. Our goal is to enhance the community and to convey a benefit to the community by undertaking what would be extraordinary traffic mitigation efforts, which would not normally be required of any developer in the development process. As Carl talked about, if this were not a CF project, the price tag on it's $750,000, where if the CEF proposal, the cost of those enhancements would be in the range of 4.5 to maybe 5.5 million. But that's what's necessary to fix this problem. And so with our road improvements, the mitigation strategies that are proposed, that intersection, which really clogs up, I've lived here a long time, it backs up from Shepherd Lane all the way back down to Old Guilford Road, and even beyond, quite frankly. And that's because people can't get through the Shepherd Lane intersection. And every time that signal wants to change and there's 30 cars that want to get through, well, guess what? During peak hour, when there's people making a left, only 15 get through, because half the time that signal is green, no one is going through the intersection. They're blocked, and they're standing still, just staring at a green light. And that's what we can fix, because we own the frontage all along the frontage on 108 and also Shepherd Lane. So that's how we're able to make these improvements. Our proposal, I'm not going to read each and every one of it, but basically in the zoning regulations, and I will refer you to our website, all of these slides, all of these references that I make to zoning regulations are available on our website, www.ericksonliving@limestone.com. Here it is, yeah, Erickson@limestone.com. I'm sorry, delete the living part, Erickson@limestone.com. And so what we've been trying to do is to put up our plans as they change and as we go through different iterations, and so you can keep abreast of developments that occur. But the reason that we are here today is that we're required to hold a pre-submission community meeting before submitting any zoning proposal. And so you've seen the signs along Route 108, and I think there's a total of 8 of them up there right now. We go through a very involved approval process for this, and it's very, very community input oriented. There's lots of meetings. We've had to date one initial meeting with the zoning board, and incidentally, all adjoining property owners should have received letters from my office and informing them of that. They should have received letters about tonight's meeting. We do the very best we can. We post the property, and we're collecting email addresses and letting as many people know. And some folks, the River Hill Village Center has been the village board has been very helpful, Susan, for putting out notices to the constituents. It was even in this monthly newsletter that came out, so it's really been helpful with the outreach, I would say. But anyway, we feel that we do satisfy and meet a lot of the intentions, all of the intentions, frankly, of the CEF zoning, as well as some other important plans and strategies that the county has embraced, including the Plan Howard 2030, which is the county's general plan. I've cited here a number of policies and goals that we think that this plan, this evolving plan, will further and help fulfill the county and its objective to develop in a manner that is complementary and compatible to the surrounding community. One question that's come up, and this is an excerpt from the actual Plan 2030 general plan for Howard County, and the question has been, is it appropriate or is it even permissible to file a zoning map amendment when you're not already in the planned service area? And I just want to say to you that's not an unreasonable question to ask. Quite frankly, it's a question that I asked myself. I didn't know off the top of my head. I had to do research in order to determine whether that was an appropriate process to follow or not. And I also consulted to check myself. I consulted with the Howard County Office of Law and determined that this is an appropriate process to follow when applying for CEF and also when proposing to expand the planned service area. In fact, this excerpt that I have here, and it's a little bit not visible on the top there, and I apologize, but it's page 70 of the general plan. And what this page stands for is generally the general plan was not proposing any additional expansions of the planned service area, but it also did not prohibit it. And if you read page 70, and particularly the paragraph in the center here, it talks about the circumstances. Any request for a general plan amendment for expansion of the PSA should be denied unless either, and then it sets forth expansions to institutional type uses like schools and churches and things like that, or 2, the proposed expansion of the planned service area includes a zoning proposal. that is compatible with the general plan and smart growth policy. And sewer and water infrastructure capacity and costs must be analyzed to confirm the feasibility and availability of the scheduled capacity. So what I would suggest to you is that not only is this an appropriate process to follow, but this is really the only way that the planned service area should be extended. Either one, expanding it to an institution or religious center, or two, if it is accompanied with a zoning proposal. Now, in terms of the costs and so forth, that's all on Erickson. I mean, none of this falls on taxpayers. When they expand their water and sewer and put in new pipes and things like that, they are 100% responsible for that cost. And we have, we've met with the Department of Public Works and have determined that there's adequate capacity for this use. Believe it or not, it's very nominal, this use. And one of the nice things about it, and I'll just, this may be a little bit off topic of land use, but the nice thing about continuing care retirement communities is that they're not on the same schedule that we're on. These people are 82 years of age on average. And when you and I are getting up and we're showering and brushing our teeth and we're using water, they're not doing that. They might use peak water at 4 in the afternoon. And so that makes a very good use of our already existing capacity at the treatment plant, because what they look for is those peak loads, those morning loads, and then the evening loads. So it actually works out very well. Very similarly, traffic, it's almost perfect, because when you and I are, after we finish brushing our teeth and showering and so forth, and we jump in that car, we all do it at the same time. These people aren't doing that because they don't work. They're staying right where they are. And yes, we have employees that come and take care of them, but guess what? They come in 3 different shifts, much like a hospital. And what that means is we can have our morning shift arrive before the River Hill High School starts its buses arriving and their school starting. And then we can have them leave, at a time after the school lets out. And then the last shift comes in at 11 o'clock in the evening. And no one in this room will even know what's happening. So that's why the CCRC model, it really does work and has a very low impact as compared to almost any other land use that you could propose to go here. And that's what allows us to take the level of service for traffic from failing F to a level of service B in the morning and C in the evening. And that's extraordinary. That's a real public enhancement that this project can deliver. Just quick slides on other plans and things that this proposal enhances. We've been reading like the gospel, the Clarksville Pike Streetscape and Design Guidelines. And the reason that's important, and we're going to talk about next steps soon, is that this will be reviewed by what's called the Design Advisory Panel. It's a group of 4 or 5 architects that will review this proposal and make recommendations and suggestions on ways to maximize and enhance the compatibility with the surrounding community and also compliance with the local master plan, which is this Clarksville Streetscape Plan and Design Guidelines. The proposal, we've got multi-use pathways, which enhances the Bike Howard plan, also the pedestrian plan for Howard County. Finally, we even took a look, although this is not a binding document because it's not created by a governmental authority or a regulatory agent, but we are neighbors of the River Hill Village Center. And so we, with great interest, took a look at their plan. They have a very active land use committee, and we looked at their plan, and we did identify that there are some important goals and visions that we enhanced. First is traffic and safety. We talked about the improvement, the realignment of Shepherd Lane, bringing it to more of a right angle. Right now it's very acute, and meaning where Shepherd Lane comes to 108, it comes in at a very acute angle. And that is not a very safe way for traffic to intersect one another. So the realignment will help to make that a more efficient and also a safer intersection. And then the other thing was adding the signal at Linden Linthicum, very important for traffic efficiency and safety. The other thing I want to talk about, the vibrancy and success of the Village Center. As I mentioned to you, I've been here since 1974, and I used to shop at the Giant in Wild Lake. And when I went there, everything was brand spanking new, and all this new construction was going on back in 1974. And I couldn't really, at the time, even fathom that that would ever be a place that was in need of revitalization, that had deteriorated or declined and had fallen into disuse and high rates of vacancy and things. But in the 4 decades that I've lived in Harris County, I've seen that happen to not only Wild Lake, but I've seen it happen to Oakland Mills. I've seen it happen to Longreach. Hickory Ridge is going through some redevelopment efforts right now. So you can't just assume that everything is always going to be shiny and new and vibrant and well taken care of, because that's not what our experience has been. What another benefit that I would suggest to you that the Erickson community brings is, as close as you can get to it, a guarantee of the vibrance and the ongoing viability of the commercial center, including the River Hill Village Center. This will be so important for the Giant, for all the Kimco properties, and also on the other side of Clarksville, because there are 1,200 dwelling units here, and they are independent dwelling units, which means that they literally will shop for groceries. They have all the things that you and I have, toothpaste, paper towels, all the things that go to make up a household. The other thing is it will benefit the restaurants tremendously, because although there are several dining establishments within the community, when I go to visit my mother there and she's eaten in every one of those establishments for the last week, first thing she's going to say is, I want to go out. And so I'm going to take her to maybe Ruby Tuesdays, maybe to Anthony's, maybe to the Grill. There will be a lot of that, and it will just be it will help to ensure the ongoing and perpetual economic viability of the Village Center. So that's another enhancement that I think. And just so you know, the way these other 4 Village Centers have revitalized themselves is to bring in additional residential density. By the way, not age-restricted residential density, but full-blown residential density complete with 2.2 children per household. And the nice thing, you guys didn't say it, so I'm going to this date, over 35 years, Erickson has never produced one school-age child. Another benefit. So I'm just going to close by saying that I've got handouts that I want to remind people, and if you haven't had a chance to sign up on the sign-in sheet, please do so. It's not an endorsement. It doesn't mean you support it. It means that we can communicate with you and let you know what our plans are. I want to speak to you about next steps. What is the process? And again, if we have a way to contact you, we can notify you of these things happening. The first will likely be an appearance before the Design Advisory Panel. Now, this is I don't want to offend any architects on the panel, but it can be a little dry because you can't ask any questions. The public can go and listen, but they can't ask questions, they can't testify. It's really just the architects having a little powwow about how to change the fenestration and the materials and how to really make it look pretty. So, but that anticipated could be as soon as December. Could be later, could be January, could be February. We don't know, but what we're trying to do is to move things along in an expeditious fashion. Next thing is the Howard County Planning Board. We anticipate that to take place in the January-February timeframe. Now that planning board, because we're proposing 2 things at the same time, a legislative expansion of the general plan service area, and a zoning map amendment, we can actually hear both of those on the same evening. So there'll be 2 different matters heard on the same evening, and what the planning board has done in the past is normally they give you 3 minutes to come and speak your mind. They'll probably, if you choose to speak on both matters, the general plan amendment and the map amendment, they'll give you some additional time. The benefit is you only have to come out one night. You don't have, all of you have given up your time to come out, but it'll be an opportunity to have a planning board hearing on both of these proposals. Now, the planning board, neither the DAP nor the planning board really issue approvals or denials. Instead, what they do is they issue recommendations. So these are non-binding but advisory comments that are issued. The next thing that we would expect to occur is the general plan amendment. Now, that's legislation that's introduced, and it's heard just like any bill that goes before the county council. That has to be approved before the zoning board can sign that decision in order, because one of the criteria is that you be in the planned service area. So, if we're not yet approved, or if it's denied, then the zoning cannot go forward. And then finally, following on that is the anticipated zoning board hearings. And incidentally, they do typically go more than one night. It could be several, it could be many nights of hearings that take place. One other thing that I would like to share with you is that the general plan amendment for the planned service area, I prepared the petition and submitted it to the county council, and I drafted it literally, I won't say verbatim, but darn near verbatim, to the legislation that approved the expansion of the water and sewer district for the Duregan Manor. Are you folks familiar with the Carroll Estate and Duregan Manor? I think he was the last, Charles Carroll was the last surviving signer of the Declaration of Independence, and he lived, right off of Manor Lane here in Howard County. And there was a request to expand the planned service area for a particular use. It actually, Duregan was once a proposed site for Erickson. This was going back 10, 12 years ago. With changes in the economy, that proposal didn't go forward, and subsequent to that, it's now being developed as 325 residential units. But I modeled the language to say this, that if the zoning board doesn't approve the conditional care retirement community, the expansion of the planned service area reverts back to its original location without any further action by the county council. So you don't need to be worried that, if you expand it, what if Erickson, the market doesn't develop or they decide not to do it? Well, it would expand back. It would go right back to what it was. So that's all the comments that I have. I think Mr. Montgomery was going to follow up with some closing comments. Steve, you want to come up and... Incidentally, a balloon test. I heard Steve mention the word balloon test. What that is, we intentionally floated balloons that would be 10 feet higher than the building heights. They're 6-foot diameter balloons. And then we notified our adjoining property owners on the date and time that we were going to do this. And that way they could go out and see what effect, if any, that this would have on them. And I'm pleased to say that I don't think we saw any of the balloons from any of the areas that we were able to view, but in all sincerity, the leaves were still on the trees. So, but we wanted to know if the balloons would be visible above the trees, and they weren't. So we're pleased to say that. But we're also going to reschedule early December, and we'll send notice to our adjoining property owners, and it'll be a repeat of the balloon test, but this time without the leaves on the trees. So with that, I'll turn it over.
Did you want to go around?
Yeah, that's fine. Yep.
So one thing we wanted to do is, again, part of, and I think this started with our commitment back in June, and you've heard earlier from the meetings we've had with various individuals, community groups, et cetera. We're trying to be as transparent as possible. Sometimes this is very difficult. These things change daily. Bill gets feedback, the design professionals get feedback. Things are just constantly shifting, it seems like. But we wanted to share with you some questions and some things we've heard, and as I'm getting ready to do this, we're also looking at the time. We're going over a little bit over what we were hoping to accomplish in our 45 minutes. So my thought was maybe we kind of blend this, and I'm going to put these up here. I can touch on a couple of these, but if the two Scotts are ready, we will also open the floor up at this point to some questions.
And before I do that, I just wanted to let you know with the Design Advisory Panel, you can send written comments to DAP. You go to the county website, and it tells you how to send. If you want to send the Design Advisory Panel, you are able to do that in writing. I also would like to recognize, I believe she just left, State Delegate Dr. Terry Hill from District 12. She represents us in Charlestown, and also she represents Vantage House. She wanted us to know. And Terry just wanted to see what this project is, and I believe she just recently left. But we thank her for attending. And with that, we were going to have people, two of our Erickson folks, walk around with microphones. If you have a question, comment, whatever. If we'd like to get some questions up front, if folks are puzzled on something or need some clarifications, if you want to raise your hand, we'll come over with a mic.
Hi, I have just two things. Does this development plan, it's outside of the Columbia Association? Or does it become part of that?
No, it's outside of the Columbia Association. It's not within the Newtown zoning area, so it is outside of it, yes.
Okay. Is natural gas coming into this development?
That, we're studying that right now, but I believe the plan is to get natural gas extended to the property.
And my last question, it's my understanding that agricultural preservation grants that have been given to farmers, they roll over, I believe, in a cyclical fashion. It's like 15 years or something. I may be wrong on that. I'd like to know, have you all studied what Limestone and company in back of this development might do in the future? Because this is going to happen by the time you're opening a door.
I can speak to that based upon just my knowledge. I haven't, just my general knowledge as a land use attorney. I think what you're referring to is that there's two types of agricultural land preservation easements in the county. One's called the Howard County Land Preservation Easements, and the other one is the state of Maryland. The state of Maryland's easements, when they were done, for example, Limestone Valley was done, I believe it was back in the 80s, they had a provision in there that said, if after 25 years that the easement was in place, if farming was no longer economically feasible, then a farmer could petition in order to be removed from that easement, be released from it. My understanding, my knowledge that I've never represented anybody that's tried to petition to get out, but I do know that that's been attempted and it's never been successful. One of the things, this was a concern or an issue that was raised at the initial zoning board meeting before the county council. And one of the things that we are intending to do or exploring right now is to have a farm to table. We're going to pursue a memorandum of understanding between the adjoining farmers. So as opposed to being potentially, causing a farmer not to be able to farm economically viably, we might be able to actually be their perpetual salvation to guarantee that they can do so. And by the way, also have a real benefit to our residents because we would have obviously fresh foods and vegetables and things like that. And then there are also opportunities for, Howard County has things called agritourism, where you could load up one of our vans and take people and actually see how farming is done. So those are things that we're exploring.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. No. The current zoning for the, well, there's actually 3 parcels involved in this rezoning request. One is the Free State gas station. That is zoned currently B2 zoning, which is general business. And the other 2 parcels that adjoin it are currently zoned RCDEO. So, and by the way, so there's 3 separate owners in here. There's like I guess 25, what are the exact breakdowns? But it comes up to 63 acres total, and one's like 25, and the other one might be a little bit larger. So the ones that you would look at and see what looks like an agricultural use currently, and it is an agricultural use, those are zoned RCDEO, which is Rural Conservation Density Exchange Option. And long story is density exchange means you can transfer density from one property to another, or you could sell your density, remove density from the land and sell it to another property owner to bring in additional residential density. So all of that would be proposed to be rezoned to CEF. And again, the only reason to really involve the Free State is to provide adequate space for that public road. We have to kind of bump the Free State station a little bit towards Shepherd's Lane so that that road can come through. And one of the benefits of doing that is we get a greatly enhanced architectural design and much better lighting.
So if there are the other properties that you pointed out as farmland, are they also zoned the same, the adjacent properties in the agricultural preservation? What's preventing them from, if the CEF is approved for these 3 parcels, then also petitioning and changing from their agricultural preservation to another CEF use or other use because of the approval for these properties here? Now the whole landscape area has lost the agricultural aspect, you know, along 108 and down Shepherd Lane.
Right.
You know, it's kind of a domino effect that you have.
That's an excellent question. That's sort of the slippery slope question. Like, you know, if you open the door, it'll continue. The comfort that you should have is that it's all zoned RCDEO, but everything that adjoins us is in agricultural preservation, this Maryland State Agricultural Preservation easement that's over top of it. So what I would say to you, really, this, it can't, you know, anything can happen. I mean, I'm not going to tell you that things can't, I mean, things can happen. But there is a very reasonable basis to believe that the planned water and sewer zone would not go any further because there's agricultural preservation there. I mean, you can't really use it other than for the uses permitted under the easement. And similarly, the zoning, there's not much of a reason to rezone it because the easement is what is the most restrictive document.
Okay, my first question is Clearview Estates considered an adjoining community? If so, we as the residents, individual residents, have not received any notice other than reading in the Columbia Flyer about these meetings. So if we are considered adjacent properties, similar to River Hill, then we need to be included in your total distribution of communication. That has not occurred, so it needs to be done.
Well, let me clarify my remarks when I say adjoining. What adjoining means under the county regulations is that literally touching your property or on the other side of the road if they're over there. So any property owner that touches our property or is on the other side of the road, we send written correspondence to. In addition to that, what we do is we send written correspondence to all established homeowners associations or community associations, and they even make you require you to send notices to the public school system, including the principals and the PTA leaders. So those are all things that need to be done. But if you don't directly adjoin Shepherd Lane, then you would not have received correspondence from us. But what we did do for most of the summer, and I mean, there's 8 signs along the road right now, and we've just literally done everything possible to get public notice out to people.
Okay, I have a 2-part traffic question. First part of it is, why is the state allowing you to make access to the state highway of 108 with access to your property when you have an opportunity on Shepherd Lane to make that your primary access? The next part of my question is, you have, or statement first, you have a choke point at Shepherd Lane and 108. If you observe the traffic in any given day and you want to raise it to a sea level for PM, the right lane becomes Clarksville drag strip. And you've got the River Hill High School and the Clarksville Elementary School where you're going to choke the traffic down and anybody with a BMW or even a Volkswagen Beetle tries to beat the traffic in the right lane, which creates a hazard for the children and the community, especially going towards Route 29 on 108. So why is the state allowing you to create this supposed improvement and create the choke point to move from where it is now at Linden Linthicum, which is an issue, and move it to Shepherd Lane and make it the Clarksville drag strip, which it is today? Your proposal for improvements on the roadway are unreasonable with logical thinking.
I'll let Carl address that, if that's all right.
Sure. To answer the first question with regard to access to 108, we only control about 300 feet of frontage along Shepherd Lane, and Shepherd Lane's a scenic road that also has vertical curves to it, so we're not sure we'd be able to achieve the sight distance. Also, we're getting very close to the intersection and cues from the intersection along Shepherd Lane, so what we're doing is separating it to provide that access on 108. So it actually makes it a safer, more efficient access with where it's proposed. With regard to the comment about the drag strip along 108, what we're proposing is, if you look at the actual traffic volumes there's a very, very heavy left turn movement from 108 onto Shepherd Lane. That demand is almost as high as the through movement. So basically, we're trying to separate that traffic and provide additional storage to allow the traffic to flow through the intersection a whole lot more efficiently than it does today.
Sir, also, anyone can sign up to receive notices on the Howard County government website. All of that is public information. Okay, great, thank you. But also the county makes that available.
I'm Dan O'Leary from the Greater Highlands Crossroads Association. We're only 2.5 miles down the road, so there are potentially positive as well as negative effects from this development. And I'd like to address the number 2 that came up there. It's interesting that came up in your previous meeting. Why can't you locate it within the PSA? The reason that residents west of 108 would be concerned with an expansion of the PSA is the precedent that it sets. We already have had in the last 10 years 2 serious disagreements about the expansion of the PSA just south of here in Clarksville and over in Fulton. So any precedent of expanding the PSA is problematic for us, because we view the restriction of the PSA west of 108 generally as one of the principal means of controlling development. There are 2. There are the zoning regulations, and there's the planned serviced area and the non-planned serviced area. So that's why we would object in principle to an expansion of the PSA and think you should relocate within the PSA. Second question, I'd like that addressed, and the second question would be to Mr. Wilson. And I know you know the number because you're a traffic engineer, and you've to tell us how many additional trips the 1,400 units would generate generally. And thank you.
Do you want me to go first?
You can answer that question.
Yeah, I think that question's a little bit simpler. The 1,200 units is going to generate 202 morning peak hour trips and 245 evening peak hour trips. And just to give you some perspective on that, that's about the same as 250 single-family homes or 400 apartments, 150,000 square feet of office, or 75,000 square feet of retail, just to give you some perspective on the number.
Dan, that's an excellent question, by the way, about why not locate within the planned service area. And I shared with you some of the background that 10, 12 years ago, we were trying to find space in Duregan Manor. One of the reasons that there's difficulty to locate within the planned service area is that, quite honestly, there's just not land available. Howard County is running out of land. There's also the Erickson model, for example. For their model to work, for them to deliver the high caliber medical services and care that they do, they need a certain size of a campus, if you will. And so, you know, they're not able to locate on 3 acres here, you know, 5 acres there. The other thing is that there's restrictions within the code itself. For example, a CEF cannot be located in Newtown. So most of the planned service area, I mean, it's Columbia. I mean, but none of Columbia can accommodate this. We've had suggestions that why don't you go to the Route 1, everyone wants to go to the Route 1 area, you know, put your stuff there. Well, let me just say, another area we cannot go to is M2. We can't go to TOD, which is transit-oriented development. We can't go to the MXD areas, so like you couldn't go to Maple Lawn. And you can't go to PGCC, which is a planned golf community. So there's very limited there. What I did do just recently is I contacted the director of the Howard County Research Department, and I know you know him, Jeff Bronow. And I asked him if he could run a query on, and I think we even went down to 55 acres within the PSA, the planned service area, as parcels as small as 55 acres, and there were 2 that came up. One, the county's negotiating for a school site, and it happens to be a quarry off of Route 1. There's a quarry on Route 1, and they're planning to put a school there. And then the other one is the milk producers plant down in Skaggsville area. And that's a site that I'm very familiar with, and it's not for sale. I know the milk producers co-op. They entertained moving maybe a decade ago. I represented a number of clients that attempted to purchase that, and for internal reasons, they decided not to sell. So to answer your question, Howard County is just out of land. And so I would agree with you, and I go back a long way also with the Greater Highland Crossroads community. And I go a long way back with you, Dan. And I understand the concern about expansions of the planned service area and the precedents it could set. Be comforted by the fact that there is deeded easements, like we would directly, it can't go under the rest of limestone. Other than when farming may, not in my lifetime, not in your lifetime, if farming is ever not feasible and it's released from that easement, then that's a possibility, obviously. I'm never going to say that those things cannot happen, but from a reasonable prospect.
Can I have one follow-up?
Absolutely, yep.
Has your petition been accepted as legally sufficient for the change?
I submitted my petition to the chairman of the county council, and they referred it to DPZ for a technical staff report and a planning board recommendation. A determination of technically, legally sufficient will be made before the bill is introduced. So that's when it would happen. But that was one of the reasons why I very carefully modeled it directly after the Duregan Manor expansion.
By legally sufficient, I mean that it fits within the requirements of the general plan that you cite.
I think, that determination will be made when the legislation is put in. But we obviously feel that it does.
But why would they accept it if it doesn't fit the requirements?
Because the reason is, well, first of all, you're assuming it doesn't fit with the requirements. I think it does. And by the way, I'd happy to read the petition. I mean, one of the biggest things, anybody have a copy of on the way in, there's a copy of a study, Dan, that was done by the, was it Community Associations? It was Ms. Madachi, she's now retired, but what organization? Citizens on Aging?
Citizen Services.
Okay. They did a really exhaustive study on, I think you called it, what was it, the silver tsunami. And there's gonna, I'm sorry, what? You object to that term?
I agree.
Yeah. We have a serious issue facing our communities. Dan, we're getting older. Hey, we're getting older. Some of them, we're getting better. How's that? But we need to find accommodations. There's going to be, according to that plan, 28,000 people age 75 or older, additional people will be in Howard County. And I believe that it was 1,700 per year for the next, 1,100 for the next 18 years. So what I want to say is this is not the answer. It's only a part of the answer. Like our entire project couldn't accommodate but 1 year of people turning 75 in Howard County. So a lot of things have to happen. Big, you know, by the way, this model's not for everybody. Some people do prefer to be in smaller environments and you know, and it's nice to have that kind of housing choice and care. But you know, it is a balancing thing. You know, whether you're in compliance with the general plan or not, it's almost like beauty in the eye of the beholder. Like you can always find some aspects of the plan that, because one of the policies is to expand housing opportunities for our aging seniors, and this clearly meets that criteria. And then I showed that one part with the red that I put in, because I just wanted to share that there are two like the plan doesn't prohibit expansions, it just really restricts it, and there's two opportunities to expand it if it's to be considered, and this is one of them, and all we're asking is to be considered.
Hello. I think I'm next. My name is Carol Hess. I have been a 50-year resident of Howard County, and I have had the pleasure of being at the previous community meeting as well as the hearing before the zoning board. And I just would like to make some observations, if I may. First of all, your presentation tonight was excellent. It really did fill in some spaces that needed to be filled in, and thank you all for that. First off, I couldn't be happier to think that Erickson would be coming to Howard County. The properties that you have constructed and continue to manage are wonderful. I have many family members and friends who've lived at Charlestown for many years, and it is where they are very happy. So that's a very big plus in my mind. The location for your community is excellent. It benefits, as Bill and Roger had said, it really benefits the whole River Hill, Clarksville area, the shopping and the opportunity for restaurants and what have you, but it also benefits the high school students who could be hired to work there at the facility as table servers. So, and then your residents can become more familiar with Kendall's hardware. Somebody might need a nail or a screw or something there. So I would like for that to be very much a part of it. Over 62 years of age, and it's the fastest, largest growing member of our community, and we need these facilities. We certainly have in Howard County 2 great CCRC communities in Vantage House and Miller's Grant. Vantage House has a long list of people waiting to get in there, and I'm sure that in not so distant future that Miller's Grant will be seeing the same success. We need another facility like you're suggesting. The traffic is a problem. It's a problem because we have a wonderful county and lots of people want to live here, but it's a problem that can be fixed, and I think what you all have suggested is excellent, that it can be fixed. And I think if this property is not built, who would be developing that site? Would it be a commercial strip mall? Is that what we want? I think that having a Limestone Valley would be a low impact community when you consider what else could be built there in the commercially zoned area. So, just a couple of other things. I often think of I don't know who owns the property that's in Ag Pres and who owned this property that was hitting 108, but they must have really realized how valuable that land is, being right there along a state road. And so good for them for not putting it in Ag Pres, but making it available for development to increase the tax base for the county, to provide good properties that will benefit the residents of the county. I guess really that's all I want to say, except that I am very much in favor of your community. I like your time frame because it kind of fits in with what I would like as well. And so, thank you.
Hi, my name is Norma Walgrove. I live in Ellicott City. I am a resident of Miller's Grant, and thank you for mentioning that previously. I have a question, and then I just have a comment. I am curious. I see all of your statistics, and yes, we have an increasing senior population that's coming on board, and I appreciate the fact that you mentioned that not everybody's going to be able to afford or want to move to a CCRC, and so because some people like to continue to age in their own homes. We also have organizations that are coming to the forefront, creating a village in the village or in the county where their needs can be met by staying in their own home but signing up to receive social services from a particular organization. So not all those folks are going to want a CCRC or can even afford it. But I am curious as to whether or not the Office on Aging feasibility study has been done, and if it has been done, what the results of that are. And I don't know if you can comment about that. Go ahead.
Adam Kane, are you able to speak to that, Adam?
Sure. Yeah, in order to get licensed and developed, we would need to do a regulatory process and a feasibility study that would be approved by the Maryland Department of Aging. That has not been done. We're a few years away from something like that. First, we would have to go through the zoning process. We have done some internal marketing studies, and we're going to release some of that information. I mean, I appreciate the fact that you live at a CCRC. It's great that you do. It's a great place, and I know it well. Same with Vantage House. I think that as the CCRC fills, typically you have about 10% turnover a year. That's a very small number of units between Vantage House and Miller's Grant at full capacity, and it would nowhere near serve the amount of people who have the potential of moving to this type of a product. So we'll be happy to release more information about that.
By the way, that's Adam Kane. He's also a vice president with Erickson lives here in Howard County.
Hi, yes, my name is Alberto Diaz. I live on Clearview, right next door. Several points. I guess the first is, I know you guys are developers. I know your intentions. You mean to do well for the community, but as far as our community is concerned, in 185, Big John alluded to this, there really hasn't been that outreach that you put out there, and that's a little bit infuriating because it's misleading to the folks that are here. It's misleading to others that are hoping to get involved into the process. It implies that things are moving in the right direction, which they are not quite there yet in our community, so let's not get ahead of the game. It is useful that I know that we've talked once or twice, and we're trying to get a meeting going next week. But Big John is right. Let's not get ahead of the game here. We are joining to the property here, and we are very much affected by what happens here. There's runoff from this property that goes to the back of our property where kids fish, and it's part of how the topography of the area is, and that's a fact of life. The question of the traffic is one that comes up all the time. is a very real one. The way you guys have addressed it still doesn't make any sense to us, mainly because what happens in that intersection has something to do with the capacity that's there created by lanes, but it's more limited by the fact that the topography is so challenging. You're going up the hill into that corner in Shepherd off of 108, you're coming down the hill, all of that creates a lot of accidents, which is what this is all about. None of that is alleviated by what you're suggesting here. It helps the project at its entrance, alleviate people coming in, coming out, because obviously you're expecting a lot of traffic coming in, coming out, because otherwise you wouldn't do this. These comments are just a few of the many that we as a community have to bring up with you guys. One that is a very simple one that we are worried about, at least wondering about, is the size of the project itself is enormous. What is at this point, what's the expected investment up front for the project? How big of an investment are you expecting right now?
Are you referring to the entire project?
The entire 62 acres or 60 acres or?
The approximate number for the full build out of this, it could be over $100 million in improvements once it's all fully built out.
Okay.
Mr. Diaz, just to clarify one other thing, we've been in contact with Mr. Richard Smith, representing as the president of the HOA, and Steve and I have a number of times have asked for a community meeting. So we have been in contact with Mr. Smith on a number of occasions, and we've met with him, and actually the day of the balloon test, I walked up and down the street closest to Shepherd Lane with him. So, you know, it's not that we do not want to ignore you. There's Mr. Smith in the back.
No, he's back here.
Right. So we do, trust me, we want to hear everything that
I hear you. I hear you. But what you're representing on your slides is that you've distributed correspondence in the neighborhood and things like that. That hasn't happened. Let's not get too carried away with what has happened. That's my point. I agree that the discussion that will take place and the process that will happen will benefit or not benefit the project and what have you, but it hasn't happened yet. Let's not get ahead of the game. Another question that I have for you on the one last question before we pass the mic. The gas station that is there, how much of a move are you expecting? Because it looks like it's going to be moved slightly either east or west. It looks like it's going to be east.
East. Closer to Shepherd Lane.
Northeast. Mm-hmm.
Northeast.
How much of a move, though, in terms of meters or feet?
This is a, oops, right there. You can barely make it out on here. The proposal right now, the feedback we've had preliminarily from DPZ, Howard County, is to look at a location closer to the intersection. I think this is in keeping with the streetscape recommendations that Hank mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. This is still subject to additional review. All of this would, as I understand through the process, the service station would come under new current code requirements, lighting, aesthetic, landscaping, pedestrian improvements, et cetera.
Okay, last question. I know I have to pass the mic. What will happen to what is under the ground in terms of storage of the gasoline that is part of the infrastructure that is there now? How will that change?
I can't speak to that. The owners of that would have to address it. My presumption is that would probably be relocated, I guess, with the plans that are being proposed here, but I don't know the specifics on that yet. And to add to your concern, we're going to try to get together with you. If there are additional, you mentioned some confusion about these traffic improvements. There's a lot here to digest. We're willing, anytime, day or night, to be available to come meet with you or your group. We'll bring any of these gentlemen along to help clarify what we're proposing here, try to make sure it's clear to as many people as possible.
Mr. Smith.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to clarify a couple of things for the folks from Clearview, just so that we're on the same page. So for those of you that were not at the original meeting with the Zoning Planning Committee, we basically stated that we have not, as a community, taken a position on this project. until we meet with the team. And so there's been some confusion about how to set that up and when we're going to do it, but that's in process. So, you know, you guys have reached out. We've put it on our website. We've put communications out about what's going on. Alberto, you know that I was at your house when we did the balloon launch, et cetera. So there has been a level of communication, but I think what Alberto was concerned about was whether or not we had an official position on it. And I think those of you that were at the meeting were there when I clearly stated that we have not done that until we have had a chance to meet with you guys directly. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Fully understood.
And I would say we can always do a better job at communicating. So we're definitely willing and able to meet at any time in small group settings and larger settings. And so to hear you, sir, we definitely can do a better job making sure to get the word out. And maybe one of the messages tonight is, if you hear of any of your community or neighbors who would like to meet with us, or if you'd like us to host a meeting, we will work to accommodate your schedule and come out and host that conversation.
Hi, I'm Deb Young, and I'm running for County Council here in the 4th District. I have 2 questions and an observation. The observation is that there are a lot of people who really love Free State Gas Station. It's one of the few things that makes our gas stations in this area competitive. So I ask that you keep that in mind as you're going through changing up the gas stations. And I have 2 questions. One, is Erickson a nonprofit corporation?
Thanks, Deb. Erickson itself is not a nonprofit corporation. It does work with nonprofit corporations, but to answer your question, Erickson is not a nonprofit corporation.
Okay. I just remembered at some point that Charlestown maybe was a nonprofit.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. So Charlestown is a nonprofit. Erickson developed Charlestown, and Erickson does no longer own any of Charleston. It just has a management agreement with Charlestown.
So would Limestone be a nonprofit?
We're not sure yet. We're looking at different models. Erickson has some models where Erickson wholly owns the community. We have some models where we work with a not-for-profit, and we have some models where we have sort of a joint relationship with a not-for-profit, but that hasn't been decided yet.
Well, I happen to be a nonprofit attorney. That's why I'm asking these questions, because nonprofits don't pay taxes. And I just think that the community should be aware of the fact that if Limestone becomes a nonprofit corporation, you may be totally exempt from paying property taxes.
So in Maryland, we do not get, the nonprofit community does not get a tax exemption from real estate taxes.
It can, if you request it.
Well, for example, Charlestown does not have an exemption from that, so it does not get a property tax, and we'd be happy to agree to that. So it does, even as a not-for-profit corporation, it does generate property tax income for the county.
Okay, good. Then my second question is, will there be any affordable units at Limestone, or is everything going to be at the same price?
Yes, so the county has affordable unit requirements, and that's something that we're going to have to work through with the county. The challenge on these type of products is this is not just housing, this is housing and services. So it's more complicated, but we are anticipating an affordable unit requirement, and none of that obviously has been worked out yet with the county, but that's something we've anticipated, and it's also something that we have done in other jurisdictions.
And when you submit your plans, will it indicate what you think will be the percentage of affordable units, or?
I can speak to that. The code does require that 10% of the units be what's called moderate income, and but it also allows flexibility, and that means that requirement could be satisfied off-site, which has sometimes the advantages of being able to get more units. You get more bang for the buck, and maybe you want to be in town center or something, because it's not just the cost or affordability of the home, it's the affordability of the lifestyle, which means if they're close to work, if they're close to school, if they have transportation, the overall cost of living can be less. So, but we just haven't fleshed out. We have met with the Community Housing Department, but we haven't decided whether we'll do 10% on site. But if we don't do it on site, we'll have to do the equivalent cost. In other words, there's a cost of providing that, and it gets quantified, and then you have to pay it to the county housing department. So.
Thank you.
So I noticed you were videotaping tonight, and can I request then that you provide a copy of that or post a copy of the video online?
We do. We put that up on our website.
Okay,
Yes.
great. So the second question I have, could you sort of go over the process from here? Does this go before the planning board first and then the zoning board, number one? So is that the sort of the process? And sort of as a follow-on, are residents allowed to directly communicate with their representatives in the county zoning department to express their opinions?
In the county zoning department, yes. I will share with you there's a interesting arrangement in Howard County, which is that our county council, which is 5 elected people from the 5 districts, and their legislators, they're normally very open to communicating about matters that come before them. They also sit as the zoning board. And so they put on a different hat and they sit down and they become essentially administrative judges. And it's called a quasi-judicial proceeding. And in a quasi-judicial proceeding, they are not supposed to have ex parte communications. So we do not speak to the county council regarding the zoning map amendment because it's a quasi-judicial proceeding and that would be an ex parte proceeding. You can speak to them about a legislative matter. So my feeling is that, you can certainly talk to them about the general plan amendment, whether the PSA should be expanded, because that's legislative. But I would imagine they probably wouldn't speak to the public about the map amendment because it's ex parte. That's my feeling, but you can certainly speak to the Department of Planning and Zoning, the county executive, all those other departments that you can normally go to. Yes, that's wide open on both subjects.
At what time does that happen? When do you submit the zoning request?
Well, we can't submit until this meeting is held. And then we also can't submit until we have recommendations from the design advisory panel. So as I said in my next steps, we could be before the DAP sometime in December. And then once we get the written recommendations, we would then file our official petition.
And so after the DAP, then do you go to the planning board?
Well, it happens that will be the sequence, yes.
Okay.
That will be the sequence. And at the DAP, although you can, as Roger pointed out, you can submit written questions, at the planning board, you can come in and say whatever you have about either proposal. They do limit you to 3 minutes, typically, five minutes for a group at the planning board. At the zoning board, you're not limited in terms of time, typically. They have the right, obviously, the chair can say that the testimony is repetitive and they could curtail it, but there's not a pre-established time frame in a quasi-judicial proceeding.
Okay, thanks.
Gentlemen, good evening. Thanks a lot for coming again. Thank you for your original testimony to the zoning board last month, and thank you for coming here today. I appreciate also the amendments that you made, providing what you call the park you provided. We hope to get more detail on what that would be, because it was very general in your presentation. I live in River Hill, and will be intimately affected by your development. And currently, I'll state up front, I'm in opposition to your current plan. So, Bill, I also want to note that while you didn't present it this evening, I did see that you also filed something that would allow that the CCRC's facilities to not be in the planned sewer and water district. So you're doing it kind of both ways, I noticed.
No, I didn't do that. I'm sorry, what do you... I didn't file anything that would allow a CCRC to not be in the planned service area. What I did
Let's just
do-
talk about it rather than do it in this form. I'm happy to show you what I have.
Okay.
So maybe I'm confused.
No, are you thinking, oh, I know what you're thinking of, a separate zoning regulation amendment that affects the B1 zone.
That's probably it. Yeah.
And that was to have nursing homes, not CCRCs,
Right,
but
right,
nursing homes.
right. And skilled care facilities, yeah.
In a B1 zone.
Okay, and that wouldn't apply here?
No, and by the way, that was for Normandy Shopping Center over on Route 40.
Oh, well, there you go. So, all right, well, that kind of sidetracked us a little bit, but let's get back. So as I indicated in the original zoning board meeting, the size and the scope are major concerns. Thousands of new residents and 10, maybe 20 new buildings with hundreds and hundreds of cars in these facilities with, like you said, 10 years of construction will have an effect, a negative effect on our lives in the community. And as I indicated before, while we appreciate your traffic improvements, I'd like to echo the gentleman in the front that the improvements to us don't meet the CEF requirements. They are not open to the public. While they are improvements to the road, you're improving the road but adding thousands of people. So it really balances itself out. This community is not open to the public. I want that to be out here. It's not in the presentation. Your communities are gated. So we can't even enter with children. We can't enter the facility, right? It's a gated, iron or maybe concrete. I don't know what it's made of, but it's a gate. So we can't enter the facility. And so it's not open to the public. So as a community, we need to decide, and it's not up to us as a community, but basically the community needs to decide whether to be on board or not. And while I appreciate the improvements you're making to the road, and while I do appreciate the park and the little bit of green space, we need to decide whether we're going to amend the regulations and then amend the regulations again to provide this facility or not. And I would say up here today, as it's planned out here, I would say that the current plan, I'm in opposition to. And I hope to see improvements as we move down the line, because I think it can be improved, and I think many of us would be in support of it if benefits are worked out and the size and the scope are worked out as well. We do understand the economies of scale, as I've indicated before. I do get that point, but at some point we need to decide whether this is the correct size for where it's located. And I thank you all for providing this presentation.
Matt, thank you very much. One thing I'd just like to comment there is that there are benefits to a Erickson size model CCRC that benefit not only the residents of the community, but also the residents of the greater community. And those benefits are that it's only the size of the proposal that allows the high level of medical care that takes place on site. There is, for example, a physicians group that is located there on site and that only sees Erickson residents. They can come in without an appointment and get a 30-minute time slot with their doctor. That's unprecedented. And it's because they have a critical mass of residents present on site. And I'd also like to put this into perspective. Some of you are familiar with Charlestown, and some of you are familiar with Riderwood. Riderwood, I believe, is nearly 2,000 independent living units.
That's correct. It's just about 1,900 units
Okay, so
of the independent living.
This one is, say, 40% smaller than Riderwood. And similarly with Charlestown. Charlestown, I believe, is 1,500, is that right?
That's correct.
1,500. So this is a smaller model. And then, so the other thing, that's the benefit to the residents. But the offside is, you know, these traffic improvements are extraordinarily expensive. And at the end of the day, I'd like you to consider that because of this project, the level of service through Clarksville, especially at that very difficult Shepherd Lane, is going to be improved from the current level of service F to a level of service B in the morning and level of service C in the afternoon. So you can say, I mean, that's incorporating all of the density that is proposed. So is the request that you want it to go to an A or a B? I don't know that that can be done with a smaller model. The proposal to provide a density level, I happened to see on a post on Facebook, you know, I kind of watch Facebook, that somebody said that this was comparable to the entire Pointers Run community. Well, that's, I don't want to use the word disingenuous because that kind of connotes an intent to mislead. It's not disingenuous, but it's mistaken. And the reason is that when you compare 1,200 dwelling units at a CCRC where the average age is 82 years of age to a typical, you know, Pointers Run dwelling unit, which has, you know, three kids in school, and I don't know about you, but every one of my kids had a car in the driveway. I mean, the number of trips and the intent. So a dwelling unit, you're comparing apples and oranges. Like a CCR dwelling unit is not equal to a Pointers Run or a River Hill Village Center dwelling unit. Apples and oranges. These people, I mean, quite honestly, we try to get them out and about, but some of them don't choose not to leave the campus for sometimes weeks at a time. So it's not the same intensity, and I would invite people to go to one of the campuses if you haven't been there. Just contact us. We'll make the arrangements. We'll be happy to let you see the really de minimis impact that it has.
And just to add on more to that, there's facilities that are provided by Erickson. There's shuttle service that's provided that's going to help residents get outside to the community. So instead of driving their car to neighboring restaurants or the grocery store, there's going to be shuttle service that's provided to get people from one place to another. So not only are you looking at fewer trips to start with, there's lots of amenities that Erickson provides to help the community to keep those trips lower. So it's certainly a much lower impact. And again, as Bill mentioned, the levels of service that we're going to enhance with the proposal that we have, it's going to be better than it is today. You know, and again, that's the community enhancement that's provided.
Thank you both for
Thank
your
you,
response. So I'd say that while those are added benefits, that those are benefits solely to the community there and not benefits, they're the benefits to only those residents, right? It's inaccessible to the public. So while I appreciate the physician services that I can send my grandfather to if he lives on site, it's inaccessible or unaccessible, I don't know the right term you might want to use, but either way, I can't walk in and see a doctor there, right? It's basically walled off. It's like, I called it before, I don't want to say mini city, but it's basically a walled off area like Penn would be in Philly, where you walk around it, but you can't get in until you show your ID card or something like that. So,
Well, just to be clear, Matt, there are places where the general public, whether you live at the Erickson community or have a family member, there are places that will be open to the public, and that's the linear park along the frontage of the project on 108. Also, what's proposed is the dog park and the children's playground.
yeah, and that's
all
I'd
of that
love to
will
see
be
them.
open.
I mean, I'd love more details. I think those are great added benefits. I spoke at the last meeting about the community benefits, and like I said, those are the most important things. If we're going to build something and you want the community to be behind the project, and some of us are willing, we're not set in stone, we like added benefits for our community. That's all.
So Matt, to that, I know we've made several attempts to coordinate a time. We would welcome the opportunity to sit down with you and talk in
sure.
greater detail about your concerns and, you know,
Sure.
anybody else you're aware of as well.
Most of the
that.
community we're actively involved. There's a lot of school stuff going on right now.
Understand.
With
Understand.
redistricting, so a lot of folks.
It's
you know,
very difficult.
It is. So that's only what I told Roger is that we'd love to meet. I'd love to meet, but it's just really hectic right now. So
Certainly.
thank you, and thank you for coming tonight. Really.
Mm-hmm. One more here.
Good evening. This is going to be a math question. Hope you don't mind. The area where you're building has any homes on roughly 1 acre to perhaps 30, 40 acres if it's a farm, right? So if you assume, even take 3 acres per household and perhaps 2 cars per family, you're looking at 40 cars over 60 acres versus potentially with 1,400 units, 3,000 cars in that same area. I'm just puzzled how putting in a couple of left turn lanes will absorb the impact of going from 40 cars, potentially 3,000 cars, in an area and a road that's very congested to begin with.
Again, I think we've mentioned before, I'm not sure we're getting the 3,000 car number from. This is a continuing care retirement community. The numbers that we base our projections on are from what we call the Institute of Transportation Engineers. They publish national statistics for similar land uses. And actually, we've done a lot of work for other Erickson communities to determine how many trips a similar site generates. And what we're showing in our study is that it's going to be, the trip rate is less than 0.16 trips per unit. And a lot of those trips that we look at during that peak hour are really staff-related or visitors. It's not even so much the people that live there that you're going to be seeing on the road network. So 3,000 is nothing like what you're going to see there. We're talking about the peak hour trips of 200, which is about the same as 400 homes. You know, so again, there's not 3,000 vehicles. The impact that we're mitigating it far exceeds what we're going to be putting onto the road network.
And to add to that, the concern about residents and their vehicles. If anybody has had a parent or a grandparent who's owned a vehicle, we've experienced this quite a bit at our communities. The vehicle it's important. It's an important independence. It's just been in their lives since they were teenagers. It's security. Thank you. What we find is folks move into our communities, they've got to have that car. But what we do find is after months or a year of living within the community, some of the improvements or the enhancements you've heard about here, shuttle bus services, the services we provide within the community, we find that the resident cars are used less and less. The car is still there. It's never going to go away. They've got to have it, but they find that there's just less need to use it going forward. We spend most of our time fixing flat tires and dead batteries within some of our more mature communities because the cars are just not driven.
Sorry. What I hear are mainly younger people making some observations, and they don't really understand the senior community as well. I live in an over 55 community at present. Tonight's probably the first night I've been out for a while. I usually stay in at night. And I may get out on the road maybe once or twice a week, not during peak hours. So I'm not adding to the traffic. I'm not adding to the school problems, not picking up kids, not delivering kids. Miller's Grant, for example, is a 50-acre site on a small road. I think the only improvements they did were some left and right-hand turn lanes to get into that community. And I don't see that as having any transportation issues. So the transportation enhancements that you're making, I believe, will probably benefit the outside community much, much more than it will the other community. Your reference, the average age is going to be somewhat over 80. You are correct. Seniors do give up their vehicles after a while, mainly because they're fearful of either driving out at night or they really shouldn't be. And I'm sure there are some parents here or children here who wish their parents weren't driving anymore. So the fact that, no, we're not going to be adding to the traffic substantially, if at all, on Clarksville Pike. Thanks.
Could I just respond to that? The gentleman in the back asked how, making these improvements but adding this many people can make an overall better situation. And the reason is that there's two ways to really solve it. One is through two-dimensional spatial expansions, like widen the road and additional lanes, and we're doing a lot of that. But the other is temporal, and temporal refers to timing. And as this lady, the woman mentioned in the front row here, our residents don't hit the road at the same time that the rest of us all need to. We don't participate in morning rush hour. Our residents don't participate in morning rush hour. Our residents don't participate in evening rush hour. When our residents come and they're in their mid to late 70s, they do like to bring their vehicles because that's independence. And they will drive and leave campus, but they won't do it during peak hour because my mother's 78 years old. She doesn't drive at night, she doesn't drive in the rain, and she doesn't drive when traffic is heavy. So they will self-select the times they hit the highway, the times that they're going to go with their girlfriends down to Ruby Tuesdays to get a sandwich. And it will not be during those peak hours. And so, one of the things I like to say is your worst highway, pick 270. Maybe that's not a good example, but 108, for example, where it comes through. It is underutilized 85% of the time. Go out there right now. Go out there tonight at 11. Go at 2 in the morning. Go at 6 in the morning. That's called temporal separation. We have a lot of unused capacity on our roadways if we'd only just agree to use them at different times. And that's what a CCRC allows us to do.
And just to be clear, I'm neutral on the development. It's the traffic that's a concern.
Right.
And on a footnote, my parents are in the 70s and the 80s, and they drive a heck of a lot more than I do. Maybe I just don't drive it. Mother's right there, and she'll endorse that.
Yeah. Thank you.
We have a resident here tonight from Riderwood who drove, and I would like she's been wanting to speak, and Scott, if you'd be so kind.
Well, I don't know, certainly I can reinforce. In fact,
you want to stand and maybe
can you state your name and stand up? And you had lived in Howard County and had a distinguished career here, and now live in Riderwood.
I love Howard County. We lived here 33 years in Columbia, first in Owen Brown, then in Wild Lake, and I had the privilege of being the health officer here in Howard County from mid-1999 to the end of 2001. I certainly can reinforce what they're saying about the driving. Riderwood has many more residents than are being proposed for this community. And by and large, my neighbors' cars stay parked all the time because they have shuttles not only to the grocery store, they have shuttles to the mall. Riderwood will take you anywhere you want to go, even to not free, you pay for it, but you can transport to the airport if you want. You don't have to drive if you don't want to drive. And several of my friends already, we've been there 16 months, have given their cars to their grandchildren because they really find that they don't need them anymore. So what they're saying about the driving pattern certainly is true. I don't know about, obviously I'm convinced that a CCRC is the way to live and certainly would support that model. Aging in place, this is like the ultimate aging in place because you find a place that you can live and all of your needs as you age. And although we'd like to think we're never going to get infirmed, most of us do. And it's nice to know they have the security that's taken care of. And certainly if anybody wants to talk to me and talk about what it's like to be involved with one of these communities, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you. In the sake of time, and if we have one more, if somebody who hasn't asked a question would like to ask the question, please.
We got 2 more.
2 more? Okay, great.
Thank you. I live in Clearview Estates as well, and I feel like I'm coming sort of late to this party. And this is the first time that I'm seeing that presentation. But what you had mentioned earlier, there will be a medical facility within the community. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Is it going to be manned 24 hours a day, or is it just during the day?
They will have somebody on call. Usually there's a doctor on call, but they will have, once the care center opens, there will be staff there 24/7.
Okay, so our community is adjacent to this proposed community, and one of my concerns is with there being so many elderly people that may need more of an emergency services, how much stress is that going to put in the fire and ambulance services? And with that, there's going to be a noise pollution, obviously, to the community every time an ambulance is called into the community and heading towards Howard County General Hospital.
Great question. So yes, we have a protocol in place that within each apartment, the residents have it's a pull cord system, so that if the resident has an issue, falls, or is not feeling well, they can notify the security at the front desk that they're having an issue. The staff at the front desk will send somebody to make an assessment, and from there they will make a decision of is this a condition that should be elevated to a 911 call, or is it something that perhaps could be handled with the staff internally. And we have data from our 20 communities that suggests there's a significant, the majority of those calls when they come through with the pull cord notification, e-call is the term we use, are handled internally, that it does not require a 911 response with the local fire EMS service.
So with 1,200 units, how many residents are you expecting?
On average, it would probably be about 1.2 people per resident, so it might be in the 1,300 to 1,400 range, approximately.
So have you guys done any study as to number of ambulance trips that may require per day, per week?
Our experience has been at a fully mature community, a larger community. It's averaging perhaps 3 trips on average per a day at a fully mature community. You have to keep in mind, these are folks who've been living there for, in some cases, up to a decade. So we see an increase in those calls because of the frailty level of the residents.
Okay, as an adjoining community, that is one of our concerns.
Absolutely.
And I don't know whether I'm convinced this is the right thing or not.
Right.
Thank you for the question. I would say we're going to be talking to Howard County Fire and Rescue to make sure that they have adequate abilities. And one of the huge advantages, and we love this question, because one of the huge advantages of a CCRC with all these support services and all this medical is the actual hospitalizations and readmissions to hospital is significantly lower for seniors who live in this type of environment than for seniors who live in their own home, because they have all this medical care, they have all the social service, they have the security and the first responders, as Steve talked about. So it's not only produces a lot less ambulance trips than one would think, but it's like the greatest, most optimal product for the actual senior to live in, because they don't want to go to hospitals and they won't want to go back and forth in the ambulance. And when you put supportive services, that's really the way to manage the health care and keep the hospitalizations down.
So I have no doubt this is going to be a community that's going to serve the people, the residents well. But as residents of the surrounding community, if I have to hear an ambulance going by my house 3-4 times a day, that's a disturbance. And that is one of my concerns.
Last question, because we would like, our time will be limited to go around. There's Scott. We will try to get.
Is there somebody who hasn't?
One quick one.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Was Erickson Corporation bought out of bankruptcy by Steve Brashadi, therefore making it totally a profit because he wants his money back?
So Erickson was bought out of bankruptcy and after the recession. None of the communities were impacted at all and remained strong and full. And we were purchased by Redwood, a Redwood partnership that is managed by James Davis, who is related to Mr. Brashadi. But Mr. Brashadi is not involved in the corporation. And we all wish the Ravens good luck.
Honestly, I think the traffic improvements that you have proposed are awesome, and I understand the numbers that you have. I understand your presentation about how the traffic would be improved, because it would have, hallelujah, it would give us timing for the traffic lights on that road. And the other thing I think you guys need to think about, I mean, nobody wants development in their backyard if they can avoid it. That's just a natural reaction. I'm also impressed that you're not cutting trees down. For once in Columbia, there's a development that is not cutting down a lot of trees. But the other question to ask is, if these traffic improvements are not made, what the heck is the county going to do? And the county so far has done nothing but give us the vaunted Clarksville streetscape plan, which so far has done nothing but approve yet another business driveway opening right onto 108, with people making a lot more left turns right there. As you said, whatever you call it, a non-signalized entrance, whatever. So the county is not apparently going to do anything about the problem. So this looks to me like an opportunity to resolve the problem with a very low impact use, and I would suspect that the alternative is a very high impact use.
Yeah, I just wanted to pass on a couple of quick thoughts in closing, and hopefully you'll take these with the respect I'm trying to give them. I think you guys have done a great job trying to outreach to the community, and a couple of communities maybe haven't communicated within their community, and that's not something that's your fault. But there are a few things that I think that, and I don't know how many more of these presentations you're going to give, but I just feel that you should consider doing this, and that is that, again, there are others that are going to receive some benefit from these enhancements that you're looking at doing. And we know that there is one company that's involved in all of the projects, and when you put up your enhancements to the flow of traffic and the repositioning of Shepherd Lane, that actually is going to open up traffic to a site across the street from you guys. And those are linked together. And I know directly that's not, your issue, but I think it's important for the community to understand that. And I think by not addressing it, and if people find out about it later, it's going to cause some, ill will, so to speak. So I think it's important to probably bring some of those up in future presentations. I would also suggest that maybe you consider having just a single meeting on the traffic issue. Again, there were a large number of people in the community that fought the Shepherd Lane light being tied to the shopping center across the street, and that was rejected by the hearing examiner for the zoning board. And now that's being opened back up again, and it's kind of being brushed over a little bit in the project. So I think it would help the community come together if you could facilitate that kind of communication. I know it's not going to be easy. There's going to be probably a lot of people with a lot of different views on it, but I think it will help you guys in the long run. So I just wanted to pass that on.
I don't want to leave everybody hanging who's wondering what that is. What is this thing out there? Rick, I think what you're speaking to is opposite the site here is the River Hill Garden Center. Many people may know of it. And the proposal is to realign Shepherd Lane and to move it to the west a little bit closer to the Free State. And that realignment was a location that was approved by both, conceptual realignment was approved by both Howard County and the State Highway Administration. What Rick, I think, is referring to is that it does provide an ancillary benefit to an off-site property, which is the River Hill Garden Center. It will allow the River Hill Garden Center to have signalized access to Route 108. And in full disclosure, I represent the River Hill Square that is going through this proposal. So I think that's what Rick is talking to, and in the past, some community members have opposed that because there was a variance that was required, but this realignment will do away with the need for the variance. In other words, there will be no encroachment on the cemetery. There are benefits, conceivably, to the greater Clarksville area, and that is, it is only with this signal at that location that the post office will locate there. We have an opportunity to bring the Clarksville post office. We've been gone for 5, going on 6 years without a post office. The Garden Center redevelopment has a signed letter of intent from the U.S. Postal Service to bring the post office back. If that signal goes away, no post office. There's another benefit. The Garden Center currently has full access. That means that when people who've been to the Garden Center, many of you have, when you come out, you have the right, you might be foolish to do it, but you have the right to either make a left and turn in towards Clarksville or to make a right and go to River Hill. If that light is not put in place, or one of the things that light will allow to happen is that access to the Garden Center to become a right in, right out only. No conflicting left-hand turn. When people want to turn left, they'll have a signal to do it. That enhances efficiency. So Rick, that means that more cars can get through in less time, and it enhances safety. Left-hand turns are predetermined locations for future accidents.
Traffic. You mentioned before about the traffic coming into your site from 108 in the middle there across from the River Hill Garden Center access. Can you make a left out of your site? Or are you only going to be able to make a right onto 108?
No, you're not going to be able to make a left out of the site.
How do you get out? You have to go to your public access road?
Yeah, correct, yes.
So the cars will be driving through your community to get out to make a left? Anybody who wants to leave your property will leave at the light?
To turn left, yes.
In sake of time, it's 9 o'clock, and we can have a few minutes at the boards. This has, been a great discussion, and tonight's, we have one last question or comment.
This is a question. So before you had talked about how many cars there would be coming out of the Limestone Valley. Has there been a study or whatever done to show how many cars would be coming out of the Garden Center property once developed? Because if all of this happens, it's not just the Limestone Valley additional traffic. That's a lot more traffic coming out of that site as well. I'm the pastor of the church next door, so I'm concerned about this.
Yeah, the Garden Center is going to have to prepare their own separate traffic impact study, but as part of what we did with our traffic impact study, we did account for that as a background development. So even though that hasn't been approved yet, we actually did incorporate it in our study and their impact, and also the phasing of the traffic signal that would be required to have that access point there. So essentially, it's a worst-case scenario that we have in our traffic impact study.
So the numbers that you gave about how many more cars it would be included not only the Limestone Valley, but also included what would happen when that site was developed?
Yes.
Well, to be accurate, I think
the trip. I think she's talking about the trip generation versus the grading, right? So
the trip generation figure that you gave earlier was just for our site. Just for our site, but the level of but the level of service that is currently in F, and the ability to improve to a level of service B in the morning and a level of service C in the afternoon, it includes not only the traffic that we propose to generate, but it includes all background traffic, which means it includes the River Hill Garden Center redevelopment. It even includes all the way down at the enclave at River Hill opposite St. Louis. Even though those houses haven't been built yet, it's programmed, so it's built in. And I think, do they still make you put in a 3% growth factor for that? What's the
we use 1.5, which
use
is
1.5
with the corridor.
Yeah, so they have a background, just we don't know where it's coming from, but you know how every year it just gets a little worse. So they add in a 3.5 factor. So when you bring in all of those things, The improvement level is from an F to a B in the morning to a C in the afternoon. So
Generation was included. That was just my question.
Again, when I reference the 245 trips, that's specific to our site. As part of the background, that incorporated all of the trips that are associated with the garden center. Does that make sense? Okay. When we talk about, yeah, when we talk about the background traffic, that's all the approved developments in the area. So we have a list of 8 developments that we incorporated. We also went above and beyond and included the garden center. That's not approved. That hasn't even been submitted yet, but we know that's very relevant to what we're doing and what we're proposing since it's directly opposite our site. So when we ran our analysis, we incorporated the traffic that would be generated from that site into what happens on the network, so to speak. So our site is 245 trips. They're generating additional traffic that's incorporated into the intersection. Does that make sense?
It's 9 o'clock, and we have to be out of here, but we will be at the boards for a few minutes, but they're going to have to start breaking down the room. Thank you. This PowerPoint presentation will be up on our website, Erickson@atlimestone.com. And thank you, and if you want to come up and talk, please, we'll be here for a few minutes more.